You're running it on?
It's right there. She's coming back.
Okay, it's not.
Yes.
Okay. You all right? You okay over there?
Yeah, with just my keys, they're okay.
Mark, you need a paper clip?
Oh, no, thanks.
Need a paperclip?
No, okay, I just,
Paper clip will work.
I was a little hot before. It's all right. Yeah, thanks. I can make it semi-official.
He didn't even do the interviews and he was hot.
I know. All right.
All right, let's get started. You guys good with that, James? You good with getting started, or you want to wait for this other thing?
You can get started, you're gonna have to wait for his.
Yeah, not a problem. We can get started. Okay, let's call the meeting to order. We'll start with the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome to the April 1st meeting of the Southampton Town Trustees, 1 o'clock, or actually we're starting late, 1:15. I apologize for that. I would ask the Secretary and Treasurer to please call the
All right. Scott M. Harwitz,
here.
Secretary Treasurer Ed Warner, present. Richard T. Marin, he's absent. Joseph R. McLaughlin. Present. Matt Parsons.
Yes. Yes,
We
he's
have a
here.
quorum.
Thank you. So the next meeting we're going to have is going to be April 15th, 2024, 9:30 a.m. work session, followed by probably executive and other stuff, but 1 o'clock general session on April 15th, generally 9:30 and 1. We do have some minutes that need to be accepted. We have the first special meeting, May 22nd, 2023. That was a 3 p.m. meeting. We have the regular meeting, June 5th, 2023. It was a 1 p.m. And also the regular meeting on June 26th, 2023. It was a 1 p.m.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Trustee Warner. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll take those minutes. We did have some communications. I will dispense with the reading of the communications. We have Mr. Paulson here for
I'll
a,
second that.
seconded by Trustee Warner. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's get right on going. I see Dr. Gobler is here with a discussion about a water pollution presentation that he's going to be making for the board today, and our,
Well, actually, I'm just here to talk to you about a couple of topics.
we're just gonna talk. So why don't you come up?
I don't even need to.
No big
No
production,
big-
you're nice and
no,
quick?
no big-
Our resident rock star is not gonna
Yeah,
perform
I'm
today? I
saying
mean,
that. Although, actually, my first point, if I sort of, I guess I could sit and introduce myself and say something.
let's get you the sheet to sign in case we forget who you are.
Yes,
Not that I think that'll happen, but
you never know.
maybe we need
Jess,
to,
we have it, Jess.
Jess, I got it.
Thank you.
we wanna get your autograph.
And do I need a microphone, or I guess you can hear me pretty good over there?
I think they're picking you up on this thing right in front of you.
Okay, perfect.
I'm used to the the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, here, I'll, as I'm signing, you can each take one and pass it down. So, I guess my first point is I'm here to invite everyone, or each of you, to come to the State of the Bays Symposium, which is on Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And it's been a long-standing tradition of having the trustees attend, or many of the trustees, or all of the trustees, or some of the trustees. And I'll be covering, a lot of the relevant topics relative to what's happening in our coastal waterways. There's going to be a dozen posters presented by graduate students and scientists. That's from 7 to 7:30. So an opportunity to interact with all those individuals and have conversations about that. And then I'm going to give my seminar from 7:30 to 8:30.
Now, on the subject, before you go too far,
Yeah.
of tradition,
Yes.
just talk briefly about our last little encounter that we had over there with you, over the viewing.
Yeah,
of the
so that
film.
was an incredibly
Why don't you
great
explain for the public what
event.
occurred? And what
Yeah,
went down?
sure. So we had found an old film. It's called The Bays Are Dying. And although it wasn't, the theme was a little bit, the title wasn't necessarily fully representative of the film. But it was a film made in the 70s, and it was made by a woman, Ann Bell, who's actually an award-winning filmmaker. And she won awards for this film. It was a documentary about Baymen, and about mainly Baymen, how they make their living, and the sort of their the way the fishery was changing even back then in the 70s, which is really remarkable to see. And so that was a great event. I was thankful that you, Scott, and you, Ed, were able to sit on the panel along with Bayman, both Willie Caldwell and Mike Luperti from the Baymen's Association. And so, I mean, the film was amazing in that it, to see that even in the 70s, they could see the way the coastal waterways were changing and the hard clam fishery were changing. And at that time, I showed the data that actually showed that probably from 1970 to 1980, the clam landings in Shinnecock Bay declined by maybe 90%. So they really, this film was made over many years. So she was literally, the data post hoc or in retrospect supported what they were actually seeing with their eyes. And they're relating a lot of those changes to changes in the watershed and the way that the land was being built. Remember that the Clean Water Act was enacted in 1972, and so before that, the gloves were kind of off when it came to coastal development. It was perfectly fine to dredge the bottom and fill in wetlands to construct things. That's how John F. Kennedy Airport was built, for example. And so that was happening back then, along with, of course, homes being built very rapidly with on-site septic systems right in the water. Anyway, it was a great event, great discussion, and I was grateful you guys were able to attend.
Yeah, I thought it was good, seeing the past and then listening to the present, and a lot of commentary from the public.
Yeah.
I think it was an engaging, evening. And,
Yeah, it was very moving also. It was moving to see, everybody was there, kind of when the Bayman got to speak, yourself included, of course, Ed, there was like a new reverence, like respect for, that way of life. And, that frankly, I've always had that reverence because it's always the Bayman who seemingly have the best knowledge of what's happening because they're out there every single day. Anyway, it's a great event, and I think Wednesday's also going to be a great event, so I hope you can all attend.
One thing, it was kind of ironic that it showed the poor water quality, the pollution of the bay.
Yeah,
The harvest areas were diminishing because they were being closed because of pollution.
right.
And then fast forward to the 80s, we have the bays going in the other direction, being open but having a brown tide.
Right.
And now
Yeah.
we've come all the way to 2024, where we're getting rid of the brown tide, and with a lot of hard work with the Shinnecock Bay Restoration,
Yeah.
Cornell, and everybody else,
Yeah.
reseeding the bays, modeling all of these areas that were potential receivers, that it's pushing back the poor water quality.
Yeah.
And we're pushing the tide back in the other direction, so
And we'll,
It-
yeah.
hopefully we'll continue to do this.
I think the thing that resonates and I think is important, and a lot of the reason why I serve, is, about the whole conversation and the education that spreads through the public, where we are all talking about septic systems at the dining room table now,
Right.
where it never happened back in
Right.
those days,
Right.
right? And then hopefully more people have respect for the resources, and now we're starting to maybe go in the other direction. So
Yeah.
these conversations, they become contagious, in a good way, unlike
Yeah.
what we went through in the prior years
Yeah.
with the COVID, but just of people wanting to see the right thing being done and pushing it back and seeing the bays now recover, becoming a hope spot.
Yep.
And it's all good. All right, so we had to touch on that bit of tradition. as
Yeah,
we
no,
hung
no.
on there
that's-
for a minute.
That was, yeah. And
not let
again,
it-
on Wednesday, we'll talk about the state of Shinnecock Bay and the improvement in the clam fishery and, the positive trajectories there, as well as some threats. So, so I hope you can all attend, and I hope you can spread the word to other people in town hall as well.
Thank you. So go ahead with what you have for us
Yeah,
today.
so that was the first thing, and the other thing, the other two things are just going to be collaborative projects with the trustees. So one is Mecox Bay, and so it's been an honor to work with trustees for a long time. My first time sitting here and telling the trustees was 1999, and your father was a trustee. You were not yet a trustee at the time. And one of those first projects I had with the trustees was on Mecox Bay, and really trying to understand just how does the bay work ecologically? And, you know, there'd never been anything done study-wise on it. We did a year-long study back in, we call it the turn of the century, published a paper. It was in a peer-reviewed international journal. It came out a few years later. And then more recently, you know, the trustees put a lot of effort into putting together the Mecox, and the town, frankly, collaboratively, the Mecox Bay Management Plan. You know, in that plan, if you read through it, there's a few things that stand out. You know, one, a lot of it is about managing the cut. And then there's specific language in that plan, if you read through it, where the trustees, you know, a comment from specifically the trustees stating, like, you know, we can only do so much because of the big watershed and the watershed issues. And the fact that there might even be the line, or I might be paraphrasing, but something to the effect of hands being tied by the trustees. And that, again, you can manage the cut, but you can't stop, for example, the number of septics and, you know, fertilizer in the watershed, etc. And so this relates to a proposal that I had put into the town that I'm looking for your support on. And this was to create, so the current plan that you had all worked on was called the Mecox Bay Management Plan. What I'm proposing is something called the Mecox Bay Watershed Management Plan. And the idea of taking a careful look at the entire watershed and every single home in that watershed and every single farm in that watershed and frankly every single square foot along the shoreline to essentially identify and have a full quantitative assessment. What are all the sources of pollution, focus on nitrogen and phosphorus, coming into to Mecox Bay? And concurrently try to, once you assess that, concurrently try to understand what are the opportunities for remediation. So what are the actions that can be taken that would be most positive for the bay? Also built in there is a plan to immediately trying to upgrade as many septic systems within the watershed. Since we know, you know, in advance that will be part of any watershed management plan going forward. So that's the proposal I had put together. I'm going to send you all a copy of it, but I want to explain it first so you could hear sort of my narrative of what it is. And again, I see it as being a complement to the Mecox Bay Management Plan, because that plan is for the water. This is specifically for the watershed. And so that I'm sort of here just to describe that in words, and then I'm going to send you the actual copy for
appreciate that.
consideration. Yeah.
And you're right, and it's like we are, you know, something is occurring, and we're driving the ambulance.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get you to the hospital, and you're gonna be alive.
Right.
But it's gonna be up to the folks at the hospital and
Yeah.
the patient's compliance.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
terms of what the outcome is.
Yeah, not a bad
Okay?
parallel. Yeah.
And that's my view.
Yeah.
And that's, so we, you know, the call comes in, we pick up the patient, we do what we gotta do.
Yeah.
Get it, we open the cut.
Yeah.
We get that flow going. If that doesn't happen, it all goes very, very bad.
Yeah.
For the whole watershed.
Yep.
All of it.
Yeah.
Stuff well outside of the trustees' jurisdiction, but a lot of our headaches are because of all the land use issues that occur, runoff and
Yeah.
so on. And like I said, septic system's a big part of the conversation today, and
Yeah.
wasn't so much, you know, a long time ago.
Yeah. And there's, you know, beyond, so the septic systems are obvious. There's probably also opportunities to address fertilizer and legacy runoff. You know, Ron is here. He does a lot of great work looking at groundwater and also looking at, you know, where are the opportunities to remediate that groundwater. And so, and that proposal is also meant to work with Cornell, and I'm sure via working with Ron as well to see, you know, where do those opportunities lie. Because the last thing I'm going to just say about the project that I should have mentioned before is that, you know, everybody always has great intentions for remediating water bodies, but until you have the data showing you what are the strongest sources, you know, you can't take the appropriate action. And so, you know, we all hate to see a project where, or we would all hate to see a project where action's being taken and it makes people feel good, but it doesn't really address the problem because it's, you know, as an example, it will address, say, 1% of the total nitrogen load to the bay, whereas, you know, the same support could be used for something that might address like the actual strongest root.
Well, I mean, that's a
cause,
lot of
so.
the projects we work on, and Mill Pond comes to mind.
Yeah.
You know, and where you're trying to remediate a severely impaired water body, and there's been a lot of attempts, different medications have been given to the patient.
Yep.
Still not,
Yeah,
whatever. So you gotta now, let's take a look at the whole picture and what
Right.
it is that we have to do. So, and then develop what works and use it as a template perhaps in other areas throughout the town. So, trial and error and continuing education that we all go through here.
yeah,
You know, and
precisely.
collaboration.
Yeah. So I will send a copy of that just for you to all read, and what I'd love to have is a letter from the trustees, just simply a letter of support. If you agree with it being a good project. And then the last thing I just want to mention is Sagaponic Pond. And, this is actually a project I had worked on with Ann Welker when she was a trustee. But, we had a project, and there's actually another project now it's managing the cut there, but, it was collaborative. And so part of what I had been doing on that project, and I think James is familiar with some of the details of those, was one, just monitoring, looking at water quality in there, looking at options within there for things, other water quality improvements, specifically oysters. But then the final part was putting together a Sagaponic Pond management plan, so sort of similar to what we were just talking about. So again, I'm not handing you something now, but I'm giving you the preview that I am going to put forth, based on that project that Ann and I had put together, a proposal to work on a Sagaponic Pond management plan. And in that case, it would be somewhat parallel to the Mecox Bay management plan, but it would also extend into the watershed as well. And it would be collaborative, so these wouldn't be necessarily, it wouldn't be my ideas exclusively, but it would represent the interests of the town and the trustees, and it would represent, all the data that that my lab's been collecting in Sagaponic Pond during the past decade or so.
So on both of these projects, are there other groups that are involved in this, or is it just yourself and?
Yeah, so the Mecox Bay one, like I said, the co-PI on it is Cornell. And then the Sagaponic Pond one is actually already a co-project with the trustees. So the trustees are actually the lead investigators, but the two parts that I was signed on to assist with was, of course, the water quality monitoring and the ecosystem monitoring, and helping to put together the management.
So I know like Mecox has its conservationist group.
They're also supporting. In fact, they pledged a significant amount of money towards that project.
They have.
Yes.
Because I know that there's an active group there.
Yes, yeah. In fact, they were partly an inspiration for doing this, knowing that now there's an organization that a non-government organization that wants to come in and help as well.
We were using, the Mecox Bay Conservation Rest. I'm thinking about, Mr. Goss and Mr. Halsey and Mr. McGregor were, very instrumental in helping the board, even, crafting from the public stakeholder around the Mecox Bay, getting their viewpoints and input relative to the Mecox management plan that we utilize today. And that's why I was asking, I'm wondering if they're all, still engaged at this level now,
Yep.
moving further up the watershed.
Yep. Yeah. No, they're fully engaged in this plan as well. In fact, built within the project, it starts out with a public meeting that would bring in all the stakeholders. That would include, of course, yourselves and the town and the Mecox Bay Conservation Association, and the DEC and whoever else we believe would be
I
appropriate.
think there's 300+ homes that abut that pond, so,
Yeah.
which is a lot of properties.
Yeah, and as importantly, there's hundreds more behind them that are equal contributors. It takes longer for that that groundwater to get to the pond. So
All right. Well,
so
I
those are
appreciate-
the big topics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate the heads up.
Okay.
We'll await your
I'm-
formal
I'm gonna
paperwork. And
Yeah, today I'll send James the proposal where I'm looking for the support, and momentarily, maybe within the week or so, I'll send the Sagaponic Pond proposal as well.
Thank
So,
you.
And I
Thank you.
hope to see you all on Wednesday night. That would be great.
Sounds
Are you
good.
going to have cookies again?
Cookies and refreshments, sure, yeah. If you get there early, though, they might run out. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
The next discussion up
Ron
is.
Paulson, right?
Yeah, Cornell, PRB, Shinnecock Bay East.
You could go there, you could come here, whatever you like. You just got to sign in and that whole deal, and wherever you're more comfortable. If you want to sit there, you want to sit here, it's up to you.
Put through the slides with you guys.
All right.
Yes, I've been talking to Ron and, over the last, few months about PRBs and looking at different areas throughout the town, where, potentially to place them. I know there's one at the, end of Argonne Road, and it's been, pretty successful in, taking out some, nutrients that are, is coming through the groundwater. There's another property just south of their project. Homeowners looking for a letter of support from us to do a PRB behind his bulkhead. So they're gonna be two properties, probably about 400 feet plus feet of shoreline that is gonna be monitored with the water quality leaching into the Shinnecock Bay.
Yeah, thank you. I talking to Ed over the last month or so, and we thought it might be a good idea, because there's some new trustee members, to step back a little bit and just explain, this submarine groundwater discharge and how it affects these bays and the various projects. And, Chris alluded to several of them. We've done a lot on Sag Pond, Pox Bog, and others, and so we're kind of like the groundwater guys, what the discharge is and where the bleeding is, so that you can focus these remedies that are being worked on, these permeable reactive barriers for one, but there's many ways and things that can be done at these shorelines to stop that bleeding. But it's good to know where those areas are, and, how focused they can be, and that way you can focus your resources into those areas. These watersheds are big and huge, so for a better part of 30 years, and I knew Chris when he was in Stony Brook as a student, PhD student, so we go back a long way, and I'm happy to still be working with him. The other part of my history that's interesting is during my early years in high school and college, I was a bayman through on the Great South Bay. One of the reasons I left, and I went to school at night at Delphi, was because the bay was so impacted, just, like that movie that I had seen too. So I do have some history with that. And if those bays were healthy, I'd probably still be out there. But I got called inland, and I think some people prefer I stayed out there. But
I think you're doing a good job of where you're at right now, so.
somebody called me to come inland, and I did it. So anyhow, that's a little bit of my history, and I've been through the county and through Cornell for years, and consulting on my own. And, 2 years ago, I still work under contract with Cornell, but I'm part of an organization, Clear, because we have all this equipment that's patented and things that I've owned. So it's easier to maintain that. It's probably over $150,000 worth of equipment that takes to do this. So it worked out better for everybody, I think. I'm available to help whoever. And I've pretty much just talked about the background and acknowledgements. There's a lot of people, actually had handouts. It might be easier if I pass those out to
Could you
you.
please?
These were basically the slides.
Oh, right.
It'd be easier to read. So there's through the years, many collaborative efforts that have worked with different groups and still working with. So not much has changed, even though I'm on my own this way. There's two young people I brought on, they're sitting back there, Patrick Murray and Christina Badalamenti, and they've been real instrumental in there. Actually, Patrick is my colleague who's not here today. His grandfather is working with me. Another baby who's a Cornell graduate who's we're both, we worked on the Bay together. 40 years later, we're still together. But that's his grandson, and he just finished Albany, Buffalo University, environmental. So we're bringing up a new generation, which is kind of fun too. So anyhow, that's an overview and the different groups that we've been working with. I've done this throughout the country, also at Superfund sites, and worked with the U.S. Navy environmental group. And so a lot of experience, and I'm happy to bring it, to be home, to do it locally, to bring that equipment and knowledge to support these efforts. So just to briefly, just so everybody's on the same page with these terms we use, even groundwater, can be confusing to people. And the groundwater, when we talk about these bays, is the terrestrial groundwater that's seeping into the bays. And then we talk of things called pore water, and that's actually the fluids between the sand grains that really is the groundwater that's coming and driving into the bays and estuaries. So pore water is the water we sampled near shore that's representative of the terrestrial groundwater input. So it's all connected. It's just that as right before it emerges, we sample it, and it tells us what the groundwater chemistry is that's entering the bay. The other term we use sometimes is called hypereric zone. It's the last couple feet before that pore water, groundwater origin pore water, comes through and gets into the surface water. And that's a biological active area. There are a lot of marine organisms that can live in that and change some of that chemistry, as well as the chemistry itself changes because of different things, the pH, and redox, and these different things. So, groundwater, you can measure it inland, tells you something, but this last step, where it focuses and how it comes through, can be quite different than what you might see in the groundwater. I think we're all very much aware of the groundwater inputs as far as nitrogen goes. And the part of it we're focusing on is this submarine groundwater discharge and how that impacts things. So basically, when we talk about the submarine groundwater discharge I'm talking about is really directly related to the terrestrial. There's different zones, and those zones can be the near shore area. I have a good slide here. So near shore you can have tidal storage, where when the tides come in, high tide, it can infiltrate back into the bank near shore. And so now it's a mix of groundwater and salt water. Just off of that, we call it the subvective area, and you can see all the macroalgae there, and this happens to be Hampton Bays, near where the PRBs are. And you can see those zones of macroalgae, and that area is very active. Even at high tide, the groundwater comes out. It doesn't get pushed back by the saltwater tide coming over it. And as you move offshore, that disintegrates, that advective drive weakens, and you can have a mixing zone, salt and fresh water. So I'm sure you've seen, you walk on the beach, you see these little riverets coming down, or you swim and you go into these cold areas. That's groundwater discharge, and in this area it's very prominent. And after a while, when you're doing this, you see the birds and other animals come to the shoreline to get fresh water, and that's what they're doing. So, you ever need fresh water, if things go real bad, go to the shoreline, you can find it. So, this is just another slide of this. It just shows the whole cycle. And I think Chris mentioned it's like inland groundwater that has to infiltrate, and that usually travels a long time because it has to go down and then it travels towards the shoreline. So you have different flow paths that are affecting the time travel in the bay. And then, of course, all the land uses associated with that. And there's, you know, other parts besides septic, it's fertilizer, it's atmospheric deposition, that all impact groundwater that's gonna come and vent in those discharge areas I talked about, mostly the advective flow area where the groundwater is very prominent. Again, this is what we try to map with the equipment and tools we have, is this discharge area near shore, usually within the first 100 feet of the shoreline. We're looking at to map out where the discharge area is and to measure the rates of groundwater discharge. So if we have the rate, we know the chemistry, we can calculate a load of nitrogen along that section of shoreline. And in many of these areas where the advective flow is high, it could be 500 or 1,000 pounds coming in over 50 or 100 feet of shoreline. And those are the bleed, I guess we could call it. So how do you do this? Well, we have equipment that have been part of developing with different groups for the last 20 years. Some of this, it has been patented with different other groups that I've been involved with. Something we call the Trident probe, which enables us to collect that pore water and do other measurements for conductivity and temperature that tell us where this groundwater zone is. And then we have these ultrasonic meters, and in the last couple of years, we've really upgraded and advanced, and we're up to 3 and probably 4 by the end of the year, so we can collect a lot of that data that was kind of difficult to collect in the past. These are pictures. The one on the top left is the probe system we use. We deploy these using small boats. The probe system gets pushed into the bottom with a stopper plate that seals it, so you're not getting surface water affecting the sample. And you can see that on the next slide, top right. And then we use the ultrasonic seepage meter. Different versions of this. This is one that we use in deep water, the one in the bottom left there. And there's other resistivity equipment that can be used that we're not presently using, but other arrays of electrodes that can be put in the bottom to find that groundwater zone at depth even. So it's this type of equipment. Again, the Trident probe you can see on the left, that stopper plate is what keeps it from going and sealing it. And it allows us to consistently go 1 foot into the pore water, that hyperaeric zone. So every piece of data we collect is at the same horizon, and so it's uniform, and we're, you know, confident that that represents this groundwater that's about ready to emerge into the surface water. The lower left one's kind of interesting. You see the muck on the probe is literally consolidated on the probe because all the pore fluid got sucked out of it, and it's dry. And it made like a knot on the bottom of the probe. So that's kind of like proof of where we're getting this from. We pulled out all the pore water that sediment can yield. And the siltier and muckier it is, the more that happens. If it's sandy, that won't happen. So it's just a curiosity that we saw when we're in these mucky bottoms. Again, we're using the meters. This is actually in Sagaponic Pond to measure these discharge rates where we identified the groundwater coming in, where there's pore fluid that says there's a lot of nitrogen in it. The last step is to measure the rate. How much of that, how fast is that coming in? Because you could have an area with really high pore water nitrogen, but low rates. And you could compare that to a high rate area with modest nitrogen in it. And the modest values, the concentration is probably doing more harm or input than the one with a high rate with low flow. So it's both things you have to know to really know the area and, how that's being affected. So when we have a large watershed, or like we've been working on lately, we use the phased approach. First thing we do is go in and map where the groundwater discharge is and where it's more prominent. And there's parts of like Sag Pond and all these ponds that the groundwater doesn't come in, it actually recharges on the southern side. So it's good to know those areas too, because that's not really where inland groundwater is having an impact. So we do this initial survey, we find these, what we call priority areas, and then we go in and we really dissect that further to actually get to the point where we can determine what a load is. And then we've been successful taking that data and going to CPF to get money for PRBs and such. So it's a phased approach. Last phase would be to monitor and adjust and to learn, you know, what we have, especially for the PRBs. Done this now for quite a while, over the last 10 or more years locally at these, you know, Hampton Bays, Sag Pond, Georgica, Hart Creek, 3 Mile Harbor, Accabonac, Flanders, and the Great South Bay. We have some sites. So it's, you know, well used and valuable in some of these watersheds. So I'll just do a few quick case studies. The one that I think we're most interested in probably right here today is the Hampton Bays bulkhead project that started on one of the offices in the Hampton Hills Association, and that's where the first bulkhead PRB got put in, and it's been working really well. I'll go into that a little bit. So that was one of the first, and we're collaborating with Stony Brook on sampling that, continuing to sample it. It was set up very scientifically so that it could be sampled, and the data we get can be very valuable to analyzing how these different types of PRBs that we put in are performing. And they all are performing, you know, pretty well. So this is just one version of these sub-watersheds. This is the Bennett Cove area. This is where the Hampton Hill Association is, and this is where the bulkhead PRB was installed. And you can see the watershed there is quite large and high-density homes, and there's a lot of nitrogen coming in from the bore water and groundwater discharge. And there's different things. There's even a high school impact there that's coming in and, you know, impacting things even more so. But it shows you the range you can have. If you're near the shore, a lot of those homes in 2 years, whatever's going on in those properties flushes out in 2 years. You go inland, it could be 100 years. So this groundwater, legacy groundwater is going to be around a long time. We could clean up everything tomorrow as far as fertilizer and septic, and we're still going to deal with decades. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yep.
This was the Hampton Hills Association property. Oregon Road is the road to the north there, to the top of the screen. And this just shows, we went in the area we wanted to put PRB, and we mapped it out using that Trident probe. And this is electrical conductance. So the yellow areas show where the fresh groundwater is coming through. And the darker blue shows where salt water is present in the fluid in the bottom. And so that tells us the width offshore of the groundwater discharge area. So that's an important thing you need to know. And then we take that data, and once we've sampled, I should also say we have, based on this, we'll go back and sample the nitrogen. So now we know in the discharge area about the average value of nitrogen in that pore fluid. Then we go in and we put seepage meters in to determine what the rate was in that area. And if you look at the slide lower left, you'll see the big peaks, and the smooth line is the tide. And the other line with all the data points represents the groundwater discharge rate. So you can see how the tide affects it. You know, high tide can stop it, even reverse it, and low tide, it can be quite substantial. Those are very high rates. That data tells us that would support a PRB, because the drive is there. And the pore water data tells us the nitrogen's there in the right form. And then by knowing the area, we can estimate about how many pounds of nitrogen a PRB or another treatment might treat. So, again, there's a lot of information. These are not going to fit or work everywhere. So there's a lot going on. There's actually a guidance document coming out that Stony Brook, North Baltimore has been working on with DEC, and we've been part of, to give some guidance to where these PRBs in general can be. I think it'd be good maybe down the road to have that group come in, the Cornell and Stony Brook folks, to talk about all the PRB efforts and even the regulations that are, not regulations, but guidelines that are being put into play. I'm more the hydrogeology guy, I don't read the PRBs, although I'll touch on it. But it's really Chris's group and Cornell that have been doing a lot of that applied research. So this is the design of the bulkhead PRB. When I said we tried different methods and different orientations or designs of the PRB. And basically that 100-foot of bulkhead that we replaced, about every 8 or 9 feet there was a return put in. You wouldn't have to do that with the bulkhead designs now. We did that because we wanted to isolate those 12 areas so that we could collect data to tell us how each of these different PRBs are. So basically what you're looking at is the larger orange boxes are PRBs that are 5 foot thick of wood chips and gravel. The next one looks like about half of it is 2.5 feet. There's another orientation there, looks like dots, so they're columns of wood chips that were put in. And then the ones that are blank were our controls. So this is set up to be scientific enough to actually yield accurate information on how these things perform and if there's any negative effects, which there could be. So we haven't seen a lot of that, thank God. That's been working, all these types. So this is just to give you an idea of the construction that went on. The design is on the bottom left, and that was applied to that section of bulkhead. You can see the top right is the bulkhead was perforated. Holes were drilled to allow the groundwater through below the mud line. And we worked with the manufacturers, and they said this type of pattern wouldn't affect the structural integrity. Okay, so you gotta be careful how you drill this out. You don't wanna defeat the purpose of the bulkhead.
Don't compromise its integrity.
Right. But if you do it below the mud line, which is where the groundwater discharge is, you don't need to do it above and weaken that area at all. You just keep it below the mud line, and you're not hurting. You gotta stay away from the curves. That's where the strength is, the seams and the curves. And so that's been in now 4 or 5 years, and it's been fine. There's been no effect to the structural integrity. And you can see the lower right. You know, it takes a little effort to put these things in, but the bulkheads are, you know, they dredge out behind them to install them. So it gives the opportunity to drop these PRB boxes in as the guys are excavating, because they have to do that anyhow. So there's no, it's fitting it into the practice that they would be doing mostly anyhow. So I talked about the 3 different types. So this is just a summary of the results up to now. And the green dots are the discharge. And you could see for really all the 3 types, the 5 foot, the 2.5 foot box, 100% removal of the nitrogen. The one that's column was 75%. You can see the controls, you know, there was no effect. So the data has been showing us that it's been very effective. Just briefly, Sagaponic, again, we looked at the different data that's available. It's the sub-watershed mapping, very useful. These are groundwater contours that the model puts out. They tell you something where groundwater is probably emanating, so we use those. And then what we do is we go in and we do these pore water surveys. And in this area, we did a couple hundred points and over 100 samples were taken. And again, we used the Trident probe to collect all that pore water and to map out this groundwater discharge area. What you're looking at here is we used electrical conductance again, even though it's mostly fresh water, to tell us, the yellow tells us where the groundwater's coming up. And the orange, the lower southern part, tells us there's no groundwater input there. So to expect a big change in the water quality of the pond down there, it's not a groundwater discharge area. So it's important for people to control their fertilizer because of runoff and other issues, but it's not a groundwater discharge concern. So what we're doing with this is, where is it a groundwater discharge? Where should we really focus? And that's, you know, what this data told us. The darker the orange shows us where the highest pore water nitrogen was. Again, the whole southern area, we did not detect a lot of nitrogen coming in. So those areas weren't having, from a groundwater discharge, having a big effect. It's still important to go and focus those water parts of the watershed for other control of nitrogen. But really, you want to look at these areas where the dark orange is. And we did that, and we found areas on the east side. We started with them. One of them's over here on Bridge Lane. You can see the orange dots. And this is an area that got funding for a PRB that's going to go in this year. More related to agriculture, but that's part of, you know, what's in the watershed. So they've been very cooperative. The ag industry, I think, has been really supportive. They understand, you know, the situation. We looked at the west side and we found recently two really, I've never seen numbers as high as this. So these are the areas on the west side of Sag Pond, northwest side, that really need more attention. And those areas of the watershed, you know, I would focus on for any type of remediation, septic, fertilizer control, and, you know, potentially PRBs where we can get shoreline access to do that. The reason I'm putting this up, we did the seepage measurements, but the interesting part is, this was in Sag Pond on that western side, and this is after it was drained. That pond drains 3 or 4 feet in a day, it drops. It's amazing, really. What happens is, the groundwater discharge, because the head of the pond goes up 4 to 10 times. So during those draining periods, when the pond's low, you're draining, but you're also encouraging a lot of groundwater to come in. So it's something to keep in mind, you know, that we saw, you know, at this site after it was open. So you could see upper left where this data was collected after it was opened up recently. And this graph shows, you see how the lines dropped? Well, what happened was the seepage meter, it drained so fast that where we placed it was now high and dry. So we had to reposition it. And when we repositioned it offshore a little bit, the rates were 10 times what they were before it was open. So we've actually been able to quantify that and show that that is an effect to keep in mind when you're opening these. The groundwater is going to come in. That's what's going to mostly fill the pond back up. So something just to keep in, you know, we wanted to show, you know, that that's a real thing that occurs. And even after it closed up, it stayed pretty high. Those numbers, 200 mLs a minute or so, are pretty high, even normally. It probably hadn't totally gone back into equilibrium, because you gotta realize the surface water and groundwater are what control is, the height. So when the surface water drops, the groundwater's winning. And when the pond is high, it's pinching off a lot of that groundwater discharge. Same thing happened the year before in June. We saw a similar effect. It was about 4 times as high. So the red lines you see on the graph are what it was, about 50 mLs a minute, and then it opened and it went up to a couple hundred mLs a minute. And, you know, again, it drops very fast and has that effect. The one interesting thing it's pointing out is an area in the south there where that yellow triangle is, was a groundwater, was where groundwater was recharging. So pond water was going back in to the water table, going under the dune and out to the ocean. So that effect happens too. But when you lower the pond, that area where the red bars were below the zero was the recharge measurement, and then when they opened it, that became a discharge measurement for a period of time. So I'm just sharing all these things because of the dynamics of, you know, the groundwater with all of these, you know, different changes in the opening and letting of the pond and, you know, where the areas, where the bleeds are. Georgica, we did the same thing. This is probably the largest watershed we did. And this work is very similar to what went on in Sag Pond, but it was so big we had to divide it up into 12 areas. Just something, a way to approach even Mecox. It's too big a pond to do all at once, but you can do in sections or by priorities. And you know, I think Sag was 3 miles of shoreline, Georgica's 20. I think Mecox is like 60 of actual shoreline, so it's a big endeavor. But Georgica, the same thing. This was where the nitrogen is coming in and having the most effect. So we took that whole watershed and determined these areas of interest based on the amount of nitrogen coming through the pore water, where the rates are, the big bluer triangles where the discharge is high. You put that together and you come up with a map of areas of concern that we want to focus on, whether it's for a remedy like a PRB or just to focus the inland, getting septic upgrades, controlling nitrogen, fertilizer. Those areas are the areas that you really want to focus on based on groundwater inputs. And again, this has been stated, I was glad to hear Chris proposing a collaborative effort for Mecox, which we hope to be part of. And, you know, to use some of these methods and tools, do the same thing to focus on where, you know, where we can find these target areas, we call them, where the bleeding is worse as far as groundwater goes. And we would hope that, you know, we can apply this same methodology to that. Although Mecox is, like I said, a larger watershed, you'd have to sit down and probably decide where you, maybe based on Chris's surface water sampling, where you really want to look at groundwater discharge and do it in segments instead, you know. It would be difficult to do the whole thing at once, obviously. So we just threw this out there to share an overview of all of this. And, this is all Mecox data that we have. And the last thing I'll just say is, and I talked about the reactive barriers, but there's a lot of piloting going on. To do these things, we're using a drill rig with big augers to put columns in. Not everything can go behind a bulkhead, and we're having great success. We have a pilot area in Sag Pond that we're testing techniques. We're even using a liquefied form to inject into. So there's a lot going on. I think it'd be great to have the PRB gang come in and the researchers, and they can tell you more about that. The site that we put a CPF application in is just south of the Hampton Hills site that I talked about. So they have the same exact signature as far as pore water and the rates of groundwater discharge as the Hampton Hills one had. So we were looking to get support from you guys to try to move that forward. It'd be another 100-plus feet of shoreline that we could, clean up nitrogen. The PRB's treat it all. It's not just septic, it's fertilizer nitrogen, it's atmospheric deposition and legacy. So you get a lot of nitrogen removal near shore. If you can do these things near shore, you get a tremendous benefit. And visually at Hampton Hills, the macroalgae that is about half or less.
On the shoreline.
On the shoreline.
Yeah.
You can see it visually.
Very telling.
So, thank you. I just wanted to share where we are and how we fit in and a little bit about groundwater discharge.
All right, good job. Plus you got the new
Each
members.
one of these PRBs you place in and you monitor them for so many years, you can calculate how much, nitrogen you extract over time, right?
Yes. And the one thing we found out recently at the Hampton Hills one was put the seepage meters back in. We knew what the rates were before they put that in, but we perforated all those panels and created a preferential flow. And we learned that the rate is like twice of what it was. So that, and it's cleaning up, the values are near zero. So we're almost twice of what we thought we were cleaning up. Because when you do that, you attract groundwater from deeper to come up and go through that. Because it's easier for the groundwater to go through the wood chips and the gravel and out through the vented area than to fight through all the soil. So groundwater, water's smart, it goes where.
Least resistance.
Now, is there an exhaustion point for a PRB? Is there a point at which case it can no longer function?
Yeah, the carbon source, according to Woods Hole and other groups that have looked at this, could be 20 to 30 years, but your bulkhead's 20, 30-ish years.
Yeah.
So it kind of matches. It could be rejuvenated. It could even be injected with these liquid carbons to juice it up. So,
I'll tell you, my bread and butter is the aquarium trade, and this is an exact thing we use. Sounds crazy, vodka. Vodka is a complex sugar, essentially.
Yeah.
Any sugar molecule
Yes.
will do
Yes.
that. You can use methanol, you can use ethanol, you can use vinegar.
Yep.
Any multi-carbon chain will drive nitrate down to zero.
yeah.
And so I think to myself, like, oh man, would it be great if we could just get a whole bunch of ethanol and just drip it down into the groundwater?
Yeah, it would have that effect. The liquid ones don't last as long, so you gotta re-inject we don't know yet. We have one at 3 Mile Harbor on Tambar Creek. that
What's the
we're-
cost of this injection solution? What's the cost backed on?
It's a lot, it can be a lot cheaper if we find the right formulation, that you only have to inject one time, with like these geoprobes. So it could be, what's nice about it is you could get that into anywhere in a backyard even. The drill rigs, for the column ones, we can get into, we're doing it in people's backyards. It's a small drill rig. Put plywood down, you don't tear up their property. And we've proven you can do the column ones. The injection could be, you could do that from a barge or bring it in and do the shoreline. But we're not there yet. We don't have that magic formula. I'm hoping the Stony Brook and Cornell gang can help us. Right now, we use a very low percentage of, it's basically like corn oil that
Corn.
we mix.
So what would happen if you took, like kelp seaweed and broke that down? Would you get some kind of ethanol out of that that could be used?
Anything that's a carbon source can be used. There's work being done with a thing called biochar, which is like when a farm
Carbon.
burns all that carbon is being looked at as a way. So there's a lot of neat things going on. I don't think we have the magic potion yet for
Yeah,
the
no.
liquid part. I think the wood chips proven reliable and they're stable and they last a long time. But I think there's a lot to be learned. I'm hopeful the injection thing can be the cutting edge of this going forward. And I think there's a great team, Stony Brook, Cornell, and others.
Collaborative effort.
What has been your approach when it comes to private property owners? Because I know when I was on the village board, we always here in Southampton, we always encouraged all the property owners around like Agawam especially to put buffers in I know how many PRBs in. So what has been and what do you plan on having your communication be with private property, whether it be farms or even residences?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're having good success in Sag Pond with property owners, letting us on their property. And the more we do and show, we're not gonna rip your backyard up. Nothing evil's gonna happen. You wouldn't even know it's there. You have a couple test wells there that are, in irrigation boxes that you don't even know they're there. So I think the more people that see that this is not gonna be harmful to them in any way, it's just a culture, you have to get people.
Have you guys thought about reaching out to the villages, to Sagaponic, here in Southampton and Sag Harbors to have you help them get the word out and tell their waterfront residents to really consider doing more PRBs?
Yeah, I think we're getting there. But every one of these success stories that we're doing, we're working at a pilot level.
Right.
basically.
No, I get that, but.
But once
just to-
we show the merit, the thing is you gotta do it in the right place.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly,
not gonna
otherwise
work.
it's not gonna work, you're wasting your
And you
Yeah.
could
No, I know.
form methane or hydrogen sulfide or
Give you
or
negative.
metals or
Right.
DO drop, so that's why I emphasize this initial work, somebody has to do, and we do it offshore because you don't have to bring in a drill rig and do all that, you can just, I did the Hampton, my neighbor's property, essentially, Bob. We did it in 2 days. And Bob paid for some of the expense, I donated some of it, Cornell did, so we were able to, it's not a big investment, but you need it to really know, number one, is there enough drive? Number two, is it the right form of nitrogen? And so that's a bit of a bugaboo, but those costs, I think can be done. I think Ed and I talked about ways, or it gets reimbursed later, and I don't know. But there is some initial work that has to be done. In Sagaponic, it was a lot of donations from the community, they got that work done, and same with Georgica.
But you really gotta know what you're doing with this, like your expertise, to know this is the right place, you're not gonna have side effects because it's not, so your expertise is very important for anyone to be successful with this.
Yeah, we don't want to give black eyes to this. It's a great
Exactly.
idea, and we want to do it the right way, and I'm happy to be doing it, after years doing this all over the place, so I appreciate it, yeah. No, we have a good team, collaborators, universities, private, community groups, schools, so I'm happy. I'm happy to hear Chris wants to collaborate with
Right.
us too. So.
You also have the CPF fund, which is a very wealthy fund, and it's for water quality, so this is right in the wheelhouse of what that fund's all about.
Wouldn't it be great if we could incorporate these into as many bulkheads as possible in the future?
As long
Well, you gotta make sure that it's in the
Right
right
spot, sure.
spot, because otherwise you could do damage, so you
Gotta have
can't
a-
just blanket, you have to be very strategic in what
Yeah.
it is that you do.
Gotta have, that initial data. It's not a lot, but you need to know is a go, no-go.
Right.
Is the
Otherwise
drive of the
it's-
groundwater enough, and is it the right nitrogen?
Right, because otherwise you can,
Gotta be worth it.
do some damage.
I think a lot of these homeowners, especially Cox and, a lot of these second homeowners, they'd be more than willing to write a check to push this stuff forward. So if they know about it, I'm sure they would be willing to get involved.
Good success in other areas to, do this initial work. And then you can go to CPF or maybe
Right.
make that part of CPF.
Right.
Write a check,
Right.
put it on their credit card, get points.
I guess so, right? Tax deductible.
Well, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank
All right,
you,
Ronnie.
thank you.
For a very good presentation,
Thank you.
very informative.
Let's move down. We have another discussion, trustee Parsons, beach events and stuff.
Yes.
Everybody will find a draft sheet. Special counsel, Joseph Lombardo,
Hey,
Lisa,
Lisa, how are
Kana.
How are ya?
We're well, how are you?
Wow. Let's see.
we would not know who she is.
Yeah, but
Should I start? Okay, so we were given an opportunity to revisit the trustees' beach events protocol, and especially in light of the fact that anecdotally we were told that quite a few of the catering companies were telling people who were going to be having a beach event to apply for a beach event permit and say you're going to be having 49 people, because the beach events fee didn't kick in until you were having 50 or more people.
Right.
And just looking at from the global scale of what's happening, we realize that the trigger at 50 doesn't really make sense. We need to find a way to essentially capture everyone who's going to be having an impact on this beachfront, which is housing these threatened and endangered species. And we wanted to have a method that we could ensure that any of these beach events, or specifically the catering companies who are going to be working at these beach events, are going to be following proper protocol to ensure this success of our threatened and endangered species protection programs. And so one of the things that we discussed is coming up with a permit specifically for the caterers themselves who are going to be engaging in this commercial activity on our property, essentially. And so, Lisa and Joe have been huge, providing, the knowledge and input on crafting this, change in our Blue Book. So,
The fact is that one person can destroy the public's ability to get onto the beach. If we have a piping plover nest, one person destroying it could result in the feds or the state coming in and saying, shut everything down. Beach events are an important part of the summers here in the Hamptons. We have to protect that right, and we have to weigh that with protecting endangered species. That is why we got rid of a numerical threshold for the need for a permit. And what we were proposing is that there be two types of permits. There be a commercial and a non-commercial permit. By non-commercial permit, I'm thinking of a situation where somebody wants to have their wedding on the beach. The ceremony, 15 minutes. It's not going to require trucks to come on and put trestles up for lighting, catering trucks, things like that. It's the truck tires leaving ruts in the sand that cause problems for the endangered species. The reason we want to monitor that is to be able to get our piping plover people there to look at the situation, to make sure that steps are taken to minimize that type of, I would say, tracks on the beach, which can cause issues, but at the same time allow for the 6th grade graduation pizza party where they're not going to be creating any hazards or anything, and allow the public to have a little bit more of an expanded use of the beach. But it still allow us to monitor and be mindful of the situations that we need to guard and protect. Lisa was fantastic in assisting me on this. Her experience with beach catering and things like that gave us insight that we wouldn't have even thought of. So I really want to give her a big pat on the back. In the draft that you have, I had put in 71C rather, that's on page 1, there was a 5 beach event permit. It was something we had discussed, and in retrospect, the commercial caterer probably won't do 5 events over the course of a summer. So basically removing that limitation on a commercial caterer will hopefully make life a little bit easier, or 5, the guy needs a 6th one and he fudges it. Well, fudging it can cause a problem. So this is the proposal that I came up with. It basically reworks the entire article, and I think it provides for a common sense approach to dealing with the issue, and at the same time maximizing the public's allowable use of the beach and the easement area on the Atlantic shore. But any ideas, suggestions,
So you're getting rid of that 5, and you're saying you're gonna eliminate that?
Yeah,
Because some caterers can
Yeah,
do
that-
10 to 20.
That's not.
yeah.
But I almost wonder, like, would you wanna have, they'd have to reapply after they get to the 6 to 10, you know? like
And I don't wanna make it onerous,
Yeah, my thought on this is, if you're gonna give a commercial a permit, I think it should be a blanket permit that goes for the whole summer. These are my 30 parties that I have planned, and if he has more, he has to let us know within a certain amount of time. Because they do.
well, they need to be, we need to know what these
Monitoring
locations
is
are, so
key.
that, exactly,
Right,
so that we
exactly.
can monitor what's going on, because when you're talking about threatened and endangered species, and you're talking about,
Yeah.
protecting the shorefront, there
Yeah.
has to be some oversight here.
That's
We're not
why
trying
if
to
you're doing a
stifle-
commercial one,
Right.
you wanna know, where are you having it, when is it happening, how many people, what kind of equipment?
Right.
They have to, and right now, we do ask them to have, someone who drives for them, have our resident trustee 4x4 permit.
Yeah, it's an enforcement issue.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
is and
You
that.
don't want to stifle fun, there just has to be sensible regulation.
Exactly.
And that's
I
it.
mean, what I'm hearing and what I experienced was if it was triggering for 50 people, and also find a beach that isn't closed. You know what I mean? Like, because of the
It no
plover.
longer makes sense based on what's been occurring, it has to
Right.
change.
Yeah, it
And
has
that's
to
why this had to come to a head, and before the season.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
contrary to popular belief, this is not a revenue thing that we're looking at, or even viewing it as a revenue source. We're looking at keeping maximum opening and availability of the beaches for the public. And this is one way which,
Well, to your initial statement, it's from a holistic perspective, because
Right.
to your point, if something's not done right, you run the risk of it getting shut down, and there's not even a conversation.
right.
So, that's it.
And we'll be the first ones who will be screamed at if something happens and the
So-
beaches
So
are shut.
therefore, sensible regulation is required for a shared resource, and the sharing of that resource does include the birds.
Because you can have 5 people and have 4 trucks on the beach. You know, I mean, I did it. We do small 20 people dinner parties, and there was a kitchen, there was trucks, there was a bar, so
No.
you're 50 people,
So,
you can still have,
so I think that the next thing is, finish your tweaks, but we need to have a public hearing.
Yeah, well, minus the 5 beach event part in 71C, it's ready, I've already made that change. I have the draft resolution already prepared for Jessica. We can have the hearing on the 15th.
So let's just do that. Let's schedule
Get
a
the
public
input.
hearing,
Yeah.
get the input, and then we'll move through the
The adoption
timeline that
process.
we generally do.
Yeah.
That's what we'll do. Let's start with the public hearing.
Yep,
okay,
So,
perfect.
just timeline-wise, just to confirm, the notice of public hearing will be on 4/15.
for 5/6.
The public hearing will occur on 5/6.
And then depending upon what we hear from the public, at that point, we will make a determination
Right.
when and if an adoption would occur.
Great.
Perfect.
That's how we would handle that.
Yep.
And then we would also, I imagine, need to update the application and revise the fee schedule
Yeah.
as a result of the change.
Because I think part of the thing when looking at the minor beach events, the small weddings or something like that, just getting them in to tell us that they're doing it so we can monitor the situation doesn't necessarily require a taxpayer paying a fee for that. It's where we're giving flexibility to the board, there's an ability to waive fees, there's an ability not to set fees within this. And I think as we've always been responsive to the needs of the individual, we'll continue to be, but implementing a little more oversight than we've had.
And again, with everything that we do on the beach, we need to have somebody going down there and saying, do you have a permit?
Well,
Yeah, there has to be oversight.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
it's toothless at
Yeah.
that point.
it all goes bad, and it defeats the purposes of what we're all trying to do here. There has to be respect and there has to be some oversight.
So with this permit that you'd give the big caterers, they say if they're gonna have a beach party on July 4th, and they would tell you when it was gonna be, where it was gonna be, but they have a permit to do it.
Right, they have to have a, what this is proposing is if you are a commercial caterer, you need to have a permit from us to do anything
Yeah.
on the beach for the whole summer.
It's putting the onus on the caterer as opposed to
To
the
the
person
owner.
throwing the party.
Yeah.
Which they don't know.
Because, yeah.
Right,
The
you know,
caterer
and
should know.
Caterers know.
And as was
They're-
said, when the caterers say, well, just say you're having 48 people, they're gaming the system at that point.
Right. Of course
they
And we're not getting the oversight for the
And
plovers that we need.
honestly, you gotta go to Parks and Rec for everything, and it doesn't matter how many people you have.
Yeah,
And then they
yeah.
shoot it to us.
Yeah.
Because it's 49 or 50.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Our-
we
our
wanna
thing-
eliminate that.
Yeah, that doesn't make any
It
sense.
doesn't make sense.
That makes no
It's not-
sense.
Because
at
like
all.
I said, you can have 10 people and 6 trucks. It's
Yeah.
not the amount of people, it's the amount of equipment that they're
It's
bringing
the
down.
accessories that are setting the
Well,
ambiance
plus
for
you-
the event.
I
Yeah.
mean, plus what happens a lot of times, I mean, even at my house, hey, you know, we're having a bar, come over, come over, come over, and next thing you know, you're like,
Oh my gosh, I
What?
got, yeah, exactly. And, you know, I did them enough to know, I was told, oh, there's 40 people, and I go to work, and there's 140 people. So I've done enough
No, we-
catering
we-
jobs to know that they can work
whether it's
it.
the homeowner having a big party,
Right.
or whether we need oversight. We need to know what's going on if it's something that's in our domain. We can't have the Wild West.
Because a
over
lot of
there.
them are putting up lights, they have sound systems, they have everything you would want
Dance
inside.
floors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I've seen-
Oh,
I've seen that.
absolutely. Yeah,
And anything you can do, and I mean,
okay.
That's-
Next step of the
What is
process.
the current, penalty for any violations? Do we-
I
We-
think
do we
it's.
have-
That's within the town code. We have no control over
We
that.
are,
Yeah.
okay.
Talk to the town
I think it's
attorney's
like
office.
$250.
I was
I
thinking we
don't
should
even
raise it to
know.
about 10,000.
Well, if we had the ability, but
April Fools.
But there would be some,
we'll just give them Mark's home address.
You don't mind, Mark,
April
do you?
Fool.
All right.
Next.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks guys, and I'm going on
Next.
vacation.
No, you're
So I
not.
will see
No, you're
you
not.
all in a week.
It's been canceled.
It's
Your
been
vacation
canceled.
has been canceled, sorry. April Fools.
Go back to the desk, Shackle. You need your.
Hurry, hurry, bring me my ice. For that vodka that Matt was talking about.
Yeah, right. I had one client who's like, so when you dose vodka in the tank, the fish start dancing?
No. He's smiley.
Happy fish,
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
Oh, yeah. Long
Why are
lived too,
fish-
because they're
why is it-
preserved.
Why is the fish going upside down?
All right, let's move right along to the
Public-
applications for
public
permits.
portion, public
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Public portion. Let's call public portion.
Is there anybody on
Zoom.
Zoom for public portion?
Anybody on Zoom? Terrific. Now, let's do the applications for permits. Board of Trustees hereby waives a public hearing on the following applications because it has been determined that the following projects do not raise a significant degree of public interest or public input is not needed to aid in the decision-making process. Okay, so I have trustee resolution 2024-89, application of Madeline EQ2 LLC, 2 Squires Avenue, East Quogue, tax map 900-271-1-48.3. I recommend its approval.
Second.
Seconded, trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
Got trustee resolution ID number 46011. This is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, New York District Operations Support. This is underwater land, tax map 900-395-1-1. It's a project that we are going to do with the Army Corps. I recommend that we...
Second.
Seconded, trustee Warner. All in favor?
Aye.
We have trustee resolution 2024-99, application for the town of Southampton at 90 Dune Road, Hampton Bays, New York. Tax map number 900-366-2-34. Just to add, I would like to waive the fees, obviously, for our project collaboratively with the Army Corps and the fees for our project here with the town of Southampton.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, I'll
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, and then on the underlying, I'd like to make, resolution, I'd like to make a motion to approve the.
Second that.
Seconded on trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so, no fees for the town or for the Army Corps.
Trustee resolution 2024-90, application for Commer Point Drive LLC, 35 Commer Point Drive, Hampton Bay, Suffolk County, tax map 900-269-3-4, body of water, Shinnecock Bay, We went over at this work session, it's all compliant, so I recommend its approval.
Second.
Second, trustee McLaughlin, all in favor?
Aye. Trustees, Resolution 2024-91, application of Smiths Creek 124 LLC, 124 Springville Road, Hampton Bays, New York, Suffolk County Tax Map number 900-293-4-2, body of water, Smiths Creek. We went over this at work session, and everything's compliant, so I recommend its approval. Need a second?
Second.
Second, trustee McLaughlin, all in favor?
Aye. Trustee Resolution 2024-92, application for the town of Southampton, Bay Avenue, Hampton Bays, Suffolk County Tax Map 900-395-1-2, body of water, Shinnecock Bay. Being that this is a town project, I'd like to waive the application fee.
Second, all in favor?
And on the underlying application, I need a second on that.
I'll second.
Second, trustee McLaughlin, all in favor?
Aye. Trustee resolution of Christopher Beal, 44 Cobb Isle Road, Watermill, Suffolk County Tax Map 900-160-3-9, body of water, Mecox Bay. We went over this on work session. I recommend its approval. Need a second?
Second.
Second, trustee Parsons, all in favor?
Aye.
My trustee resolution 94 of 2024. This is a dredging permit for Peconic Marina. Tax number 900-43-2-2. This is again, it's a dredging for Peconic Marina. I believe it's going to take place in the fall. So, can I have a second
I'll
for the?
Second,
second on
trustee
that.
Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'm up. I got trustee resolution 2024-95 for the application for the, at 801 Montauk Highway and Queog. I recommend its approval.
I'll second that.
Second, trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye. Okay, next one, 2024-96, renewal application for 541 Main Street, Queog, New York, on Quantuck Bay. I'd like to recommend approval. Can I get a second?
Second?
Second, trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
I got one more. 2024-97, the renewal application at 528 Dune Road, the Village of West Hampton Beach on Merchants Bay. I'd like to recommend its approval.
Second?
Second, trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
I have trustee resolution 2024-98. It's authorizing myself to sign a letter authorizing granting permission for Cornell University Cooperative Extension to utilize boat ramps.
I'll second that.
Second, trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Need to walk on.
We have some walk-ons, so I'd like permission to walk on a couple of resolutions.
Second.
Seconded by trustee McLaughlin, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
The first one is the warrant 5 of 2024 for the sum of $7,964.72. The roster leads as Be Ready Fish Barn Hatter, $2,418.75. General Code LLC, $38.40. Home Depot Credit Services, $389.74. Inner Science, $3,286.50. New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, $300. PSEGLI, $40.19. Trias Inc., $274.46. WB Mason Company LLC, $1,216.68 for a total of $7,964.72. Need a second?
Second.
Seconded, trustee McLaughlin, all in favor?
Aye.
And walk on number 2.
It's for the beach permit, right? Do we have a drive? I'm just gonna
Is there a
verbalize
second
it.
walk on?
Do you have it?
No.
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Is this it? Okay, so. Walk on number 2. Walk on number 2 is
Yeah.
to authorize.
I gave just mine, thank you.
I would love to read this.
You want to read this?
I've worked on this thing for a lot.
Have at it.
Authorizing payment of outstanding invoices in the amount of $35,032.50 to the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences of Stony Brook University, SOMAS, for the installation and operation of environmental observatories in Mecox Bay. Whereas on April 12th, 2022, the School of Marine Scientists and Atmospheric Scientists of Stony Brook University, SOMAS, sent a proposal for the intergovernmental agreement between SOMAS and the Board of Trustees of the Freeholders and the Commonalty of the Town of Southampton Trustees for the installation and operation of environmental observatories in Mecox Bay. And whereas pursuant to the Town Board Resolution 2023-479, the trustees received a funding award in the amount of $1,415,595 for the purpose of inlet opening of Mecox Bay for the sustaining and improving water quality in Mecox Bay. The discussions were with regards to the timing and opening and closing of Mecox Inlet and will be made based upon the data obtained from the real-time water quality monitoring station installed by SOMAS, WQIP grant, water quality improvement grant, required the recipient trustees to enter into a contract with the contractor SOMAS. And whereas Stony Brook University, SOMAS, Ocean Engineering and Electronics have submitted invoices number, 2322308317 on August 22nd, 2023, in the amount of $20,272, and an invoice 2322311495 on November 29th, 2023, in the amount of $14,760.50 for the observations and maintenance of 2 floating observatories for work completed in 2023, which remains outstanding. And whereas Stony Brook University, SOMAS, Engineering Electronics continued to perform their obligated under the current contract despite non-payment of services. And whereas the Board of Trustees of Freeholders, the Commonalty of the Town of Southampton, wishes to continue the productive relationship with SOMAS Ocean Engineering Program, therefore it be resolved that the trustees of the Freeholders of the Commonalty of the Town of Southampton be hereby authorizes the town comptroller to issue the payment to SOMAS Engineering for the invoices 2322308317 dated August 22nd, 2023, in the amount of $20,272, and the invoice 2322311495 dated November 29th, 2023, in the amount of $14,760.50 from GL number CQ99-H718006209-0000. The financial impact for this source should be Q99H718-006209-0000 in the amount to not to exceed $35,000 and $35,032.50. So I recommend its approval.
I will quickly second that and just say thank you to all that were involved in getting the bills paid for the greater good of the environment and the people of the town of Southampton, and I'll let it go at that. Are we all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Book on number 2 is done and over. Now, I know it's been a very busy day with all kinds of meetings in every direction. Is there any further discussion that the trustees need to have now? Are we scheduled for further executive session there, Chief of Staff?
We are.
We are. Okay, so is there any further conversations that need to occur in session at this point in time? We took care of the town's needs, we took care of the Army Corps' needs, working with our intracoastal dredging with them and getting spoil sites. We took care of that, we cleared the decks of a lot of things. Matthew, you have something?
What about the Brent Reiner, 3 Fisk Avenue?
Well, that's a problem, because we don't have the paperwork. We don't seem to have the paperwork necessary for us to put that on, to go, I know there was an email that they were sending paperwork, but
We've been here.
I consulted with our senior environmental analyst, Mr. Duryea, and we don't seem to have it. We don't have it to act on, otherwise we
If
would
they were
have.
dropping off today, we were here, so.
Yeah, okay.
So you could give Brant a call, tell him, we understand the situation, and we'll work diligently. We need the paperwork.
Also, the
James-
permits expiration is well over the 90-day,
Yeah, it's a new application.
it's a new app.
Oh, no, it's a new app with all the stuff.
I would say you would need to do a regular review of it.
Yeah, he's got new stuff coming in with everything, so,
So we'll put it on for work session and go through the whole process.
yeah, exactly. We'll, yeah. That's what we'll talk about that at the work session.
So I'm emailing back and tell them that we need to receive that information.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything aside from that it needs to go before we?
I'm good.
I'm good.
All right. Either I'll make it or I will entertain a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, so I make the motion to adjourn and go into executive session for the purposes of discussing personnel and litigation, seconded by trustee Warner. All in favor?
Aye.
Have a great afternoon, everybody. And that's not an April Fool's. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Thank
Hey,
you.
maybe
Might
you
also
should
have
write-
to